Welcome to a journey into one of history's most infamous institutions, Bedlam Asylum. When you hear that name, do you imagine chaos, cruelty, and human suffering? Because that's exactly what this place became over 750 years of its dark history. Today, we're uncovering the 10 shocking truths behind the horrors of Bedlam. Truths that reveal a history of exploitation, abuse, and systemic cruelty that still haunts us today. 1. Origins rooted in religious misguidedness. Originally established in 1247 as a small priory dedicated to the new order of St. Mary of Bethlehem, Bedlam's initial purpose was ostensibly compassionate, caring for the indigent and mentally ill. Monks believed that harsh treatment, isolation, and a simple diet could help starve the disturbed psyche back to health. But even in its infancy, the institution's foundation was flawed. Built atop a sewer, it was a place of squalor and neglect. As centuries passed, control shifted from religious to secular hands, and the institution's purpose morphed into one of confinement and spectacle, rather than care. 2. The transformation into a spectacle for public entertainment. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Bedlam had become a grim tourist attraction. Visitors paid a small fee to wander its halls, peer into the cells, and gawk at the suffering inside. The hospital became part of London's tourist trail, ranked alongside the Tower of London and Westminster Abbey. The grotesque stone statues of raving madness and melancholy madness outside its gates served as warnings, warning visitors of the horrors within and encouraging donations through shock and pity. This spectacle turned human misery into entertainment. Visitors laughed, provoked patients, threw objects, and even paid to see famous inmates like playwright Nathaniel Lee or the enormous Porter Daniel. The sick and mentally ill were reduced to curiosities, their suffering commodified for profit. 3. Brutality and inhumane treatments. The treatments at Bedlam during the 17th and 18th centuries were barbaric by any modern standard. Bloodletting, purging, cold baths, and starvation were routine. Patients were dunked into ice-cold water for hours, restrained with chains, whipped, or subjected to rotating chairs that spun them at dizzying speeds to shock the mind back into balance. These methods had no scientific basis and often caused more harm than healing. Rotational therapy, inspired by ideas from Erasmus Darwin, grandfather of Charles Darwin, involved spinning patients at up to 100 rotations per minute. Intended as a cure, it often left patients disoriented, broken, or dead. The infamous Cox's chair became a symbol of medical abuse. Patients were spun until they vomited, fainted, or lost control, all in the name of restoring mental balance. Behind closed doors, the brutal reality was often death, malnutrition, or permanent physical damage. 4. The systematic use of restraints and torture. Restraint was a central feature of Bedlam's horrors. Chains, straitjackets, and iron harnesses confined patients for months or years. James Norris, a former sailor, was chained in an iron harness for over a decade, his body broken, his mind lucid but imprisoned. The chains were not temporary measures, they were instruments of torture inflicted with impunity by staff who saw restraint as a means of control rather than treatment. Patients were also subjected to inhumane procedures like bloodletting, cold baths, and starvation. 5. Exploitation of the vulnerable and political manipulation. Throughout its history, Bedlam was used as a tool of political repression. People suspected of dissent or opposition were sometimes unjustly committed, silenced by institutionalization. The case of James Tilly Matthews, a man accused of treason and paranoid delusions about a machine controlling his mind, exemplifies how mental illness was weaponized. His confinement was not just a medical judgment, but a political act, emblematic of the era's suspicion and misuse of psychiatric authority. 6. The public spectacle and commercialization of madness. Bedlam's open-door policy in the 17th and early 18th centuries turned mental illness into a public spectacle. Visitors, including aristocrats and tourists, paid to gawk at the inmates. The hospital's architecture itself was designed for display, with long galleries and barred windows that allowed the crowd to observe patients as if they were animals in a zoo. Victorian artist William Hogarth's famous series, A Rake's Progress, depicts a young man descending into madness and ending up in Bedlam, a symbol of moral decline and societal spectacle. 7. The role of medical authority and systemic corruption. The Monroe dynasty, a line of physicians controlling Bethlem from 1728 to 1853, embodied systemic corruption. They prioritized control over care, with treatments rooted in humoral theory, bloodletting, purging, and restraint. Physicians like John Haslam believed that breaking the patient's will was essential for cure, and they implemented systematic brutality, including chaining, gagging, and prolonged confinement. 8. Mass graves and disregard for human dignity. Archaeological excavations for modern projects have uncovered mass graves at the site of Bedlam, containing thousands of unclaimed, unceremoniously buried bodies, patients who died in neglect, from disease, or as a result of brutal treatments. These mass graves are stark reminders of the inhumane neglect and systemic disregard for human dignity that characterize centuries of institutionalized cruelty. 9. The shift toward reform and the cost of silence. Public outrage and reform efforts in the early 19th century gradually forced changes. Investigations led to the Madhouse Act of 1828, which introduced licensing and inspections. The York Retreat became a model of humane treatment, emphasizing kindness, occupation, and moral management. Despite these reforms, old habits persisted. Restraints, coercion, and institutional control remained embedded in psychiatric practice. 10. The enduring legacy of exploitation and stigma. Today, Bethlem Hospital has evolved into a modern, research-driven psychiatric facility. Yet, the word Bedlam endures as a metaphor for chaos, madness, and disorder. Its dark history is a cautionary tale about the dangers of dehumanization, systemic abuse, and the exploitation of vulnerability. Despite advances, the core issue remains. How society treats those with mental illness reveals its values. Are they objects to be controlled, spectacles to be watched, or individuals deserving dignity and compassion? The dark truths behind Bedlam serve as a reminder that progress demands vigilance, lest history repeat itself. The story of Bedlam is not merely a tale of cruelty from centuries past, it is a reflection of societal fears, prejudices, and failures to understand mental illness, from its origins as a religious refuge to its transformation into a public spectacle, and finally into a modern hospital. Bedlam's dark truths expose the enduring tension between care and control. Remembering these truths is vital, not to shame the past, but to ensure that humanity's future approach to mental health is rooted in compassion, dignity, and respect. Only by confronting the horrors of Bedlam can we hope to build a system that truly heals rather than harms.